Welcome to the podcast, The Unselfish Purpose of Life. Over 15 years ago, I started at a radio station with a monthly show on the purpose and value of unfolding the full potential of life. The discussion always centered around the most basic value of life, which is consciousness, and the many angles and disciplines to understand its value in active, daily, responsible life. Consciousness is the basis for our perception of the world. It comprises levels of wakefulness and awareness. And that's just a brief description. We'll continue to explore this important aspect of life as we move along in the podcasts. Now, many of the shows I did, the station translated into podcasts and are on the station's website. But now, since podcasts are more popular, I decided to do a little editing, updating, and find a different placement for greater exposure. Now, that radio station, by the way, is not public or commercial, but it's listener-supported, so they can play, and they do play, the most interesting music, and they have a few inspiring talk shows, and that's the reason why I had one. So if you want to find it streaming online, it's wpkn.org. Now, some of the podcasts are interviews with people who are experts in their field, and this podcast is one of those. I interview Dr. Craig Pearson, and this was a few years back now, but it's current information. He's the author of several books, but one in particular called The Supreme Awakening, Experiences of Enlightenment and How to Cultivate Them. If you happen to be listening to the podcast in a sequence, which isn't necessary, but the one I posted today, also today, same day, but just before this one, is about happiness. And I quoted some of the experience of people who have had exalted experiences and featuring joy or happiness. And these are in Dr. Pearson's book. So you'll hear some of the same in this podcast, but in a lot more detail. Dr. Pearson, he's an administrator at an amazing university called Maharishi International University. It's an accredited college in the Midwest, where the emphasis is not just on the information for a degree, which, again, is accredited, but it's what we call consciousness-based education, which expands the potential of the student while the student gains knowledge in their field of choice. It's really an amazing place. It's like a Shangri-La. You come up, you're driving through the cornfields of Iowa, and suddenly you see this incredible area with interesting buildings. The website for the university is miu.edu if you're interested to explore more and even visit. Dr. Pearson, as I mentioned, has written several books. This one happens to be my favorite. It explores a deep and thorough explanation of higher states of awareness or higher states of consciousness, greater human potential, and includes numerous examples of people through time, or at least maybe written history, because we don't know what's happened before that necessarily. Well, who am I? Well, my name is Kathy Connor, and I've been exploring the field of human potential for over 50 years. I am a certified teacher of the Transcendental Meditation Program, and I teach this very specific, gentle, easy technique in the public. Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Pearson, who I call Craig.
Since we spoke a few years ago, your book just came out, and I wanted to let you know that I recommend it all the time to people. It's like a textbook for enlightenment, and very practical and inspiring, and many people have taken me up on the challenge of reading it. I think it's like 500 pages or something. But it's very enjoyable, and I get feedback all the time how much people have enjoyed it, how much one fellow recently told me how it changed his whole perspective on his quest for enlightenment, and he's taking more advanced programs. So it's a very inspiring read. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started to do this and kind of what your purpose was in putting this book together?
I would be glad to. It all begins, where does it all begin? It began as I was growing up. I had heard, I think it was my father who told me that people use only a fraction of their potential, and even as young as I was when I heard that, I thought, there's something wrong with that picture. How can we be given potential that we're not using, particularly how can it be that we're only using a fraction of it? And I thought, my life is going to be different. Whatever that missing or unused potential is, I'm going to figure out a way to use it. And that was years before I came across the practice of transcendental meditation. But when I first heard about TM, this was in the early 1970s, before meditation had become as widespread, as mainstream as it is. I knew that this is probably what I was looking for. And, I learned to meditate, and I began to experience that quiet, inward, settled awareness that you were describing just a few moments ago. And fairly early on, I began to... I remember distinctly somebody handing me, I think it was a few lines from a Wordsworth poem where he was describing an experience of settled awareness, of transcending, as we call it, of the mind settling inward. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, here's somebody who lived several centuries before I've lived, and did he have a meditation technique? Or I was an English major, and I was pretty sure that there was no meditative, technique among the Romantic poets. But here was this description of the very thing that I was experiencing, and it fascinated me. And one thing led to another, and I began to collect these just for my own joy. And when I came to Marsh University of Management, people knew that I was interested in this, and faculty from different fields, philosophy or psychology or art, from their own readings, they would share with me what they had found. And very early on, I thought, this is really something. Here's a phenomenon of a natural experience of quiet, settled awareness that people all over the world from throughout time have been describing. This needs to be shared. So that was the inception of this book that you've described, that this is a universal experience. Great geniuses through history have described it, celebrated it, lauded it as the supreme experience of their life. And now we live in a time when that kind of experience need no longer be left to chance.
Yes, and very important that we all recognize it is possible to develop that, because we do live in a time with lots of variations, some good, some not so good, but we don't have to be thrown so much. We can have that evenness. It's just a matter of where to locate it. And I find people are looking for it in many different avenues. And it's interesting to note that it is a common experience that you explain across the board, different cultures, different times. So that, to me, is any human being, any human nervous system has this capacity. It's only a matter of engaging it. And that's also what's important about the book. It isn't just inspiring words, which people have come across, as you have over time. It's the fact that it's possible for anyone to have those experiences. And that, I think, is why your book is so important today.
It's a universal experience. And to make the picture even clearer, just to build on what you've said, it's useful to picture the mind as a pond or an ocean. And like an ocean, the ocean is normally wavy at the surface. It's normally in motion at the surface. And like that, the mind is wavy or in motion at its surface. What are the waves in the mind? Those waves are the perceptions that are constantly coming into our minds through our senses of perception. There are thoughts, our memories, our intuitions, our feelings. So the mind is a constant flux of images and perceptions, much like the images moving across the screen in a movie theater or in a video. But the mind has the capacity to settle down, just as an ocean or a pond has the capacity to settle down and become still. And what happens when the mind settles down and becomes still? It doesn't necessarily fall asleep. It just experiences itself in its own silent status, its own unbounded reality. It just knows, rather than being focused on the images on the screen, the screen underlying the images becomes open to our awareness. And that's just our own consciousness in its pure state. It's just our own self in its unbounded state. And in the noisy world that we live in, where we're driven in a 24/7, kind of a world, and we're constantly thinking, got to do this, got to do that, there are very infrequent opportunities for the mind to settle down and become still, although that's such a natural thing to do. So when we talk about meditation, and transcendental meditation in particular, we're just simply talking about a technique which allows the mind to become still, to enjoy that natural quietness and stillness. And as you were alluding to, there's so many practical benefits that come out of doing that. But it's so simple to understand. It's so simple to do. And actually, that's what's missing in the world today. We could spend some time talking about this, but the reason that we face the problems that we do in the world is that we're really disconnected with ourselves. We haven't given ourselves the opportunity to just experience our own inner silence, our own inner creativity and intelligence.
And I think that in many cases where you became so disconnected, we don't even know that it's there. Maybe on some level or some hopeful level we do. And I still hear from people when they first come to meet me, they'll say, well, I could never meditate because I can't quiet my mind. And I have to let them know, well, you don't have to try to do that. It's contained within it. But they're seeking a way to get rid of all that noise or all that overstimulation that we're so exposed to. And without some access to that quiet field, it gets so overwhelming. So that's really the value of having a regular program, because it gives access to that field systematically and regularly so that it's maintained. And I think that's what's missing when people talk about meditation in general. They're often looking at just something that will happen in the moment, which is fine for the moment if it needs to be addressed. But for long-term benefit, to have that experience on a basis where you don't have to look for it, it's already there. It means you have to locate it within yourself and unfold it. And this is the value of what TM does. It's long-term. It's not overnight. I make sure I let people know that. You don't want to have a quick fix. Nature doesn't do a quick fix. You have to do it regularly. But when you do, you see this kind of clarity unfolding, this wakefulness unfolding.
Yeah, that's a good description. Every month in and month out, thousands of people across the country are learning transcendental meditation, and just about all of them are doing so because they want relief from stress. They want relief from anxiety and tension and pressure. They're just looking for some relief, some way out. And that is certainly a result of what happens when you meditate, when you just close the eyes and without any effort whatsoever create the conditions where the mind can naturally settle inward and become still. Then that provides twice daily escape from the pressure and the relief, and it gives you an anchor that remains there even outside of meditation. What people find after a while is that there's more to life than just getting rid of stress. There's more to life than just relieving my anxiety. There actually are fuller potentials of the mind to be developed. The perennial question, who am I? How do I fit into the universe? What's my purpose in life? Those are questions that every human being has, although they can get clouded over in our busy lives. But those questions are best answered by the experience of transcending, of silence. Who am I? Deep inside, I am unbounded silence, unbounded creativity, unbounded bliss. What's my purpose in life? It's to develop the gift that I've been given that I'm not fully using, and to contribute that to making the world a better place. But it all is based on experience, and this is what people throughout time have been saying. Just in the West, from Plato and Plotinus and St. Augustine and St. Teresa of Avila, and in the United States we have our own American transcendentalists. From your neck of the woods, Emerson and Whitman and Thoreau and Emily Dickinson, and throughout the world, geniuses like that have been celebrating this experience of quietness and the sense of purpose that it gives to their life, and the sense of inner reality that they come to feel anchored to and the stability that they gain. And as you were saying, it's a natural experience to have. It's the birthright of everybody to have. Everybody should have it.
And I think this is the news that we're sharing with people, because I remember I had a similar experience growing up. I became enamored by exalted experiences, and I would read them. I was quite young, and I would always go to the library and search out saints and sages and read about them. But I remember having them on a different platform, thinking, oh, these were unique people, and they had these experiences because they were unique people. But fortunately, I learned that if you have the same hardware and software, and I call that you have a mind body, which we all do, then why not? Mm-hmm. It's a matter of how refined that experience is. We all have the machinery for this experience. It's just knowing how to use it properly so that you can unfold its full value. So this is really the purpose of my show, is just to educate that, we don't have to just tolerate things the way they are. We can make changes in how we perceive and experience the world around us by going within. We're very good at going outside of ourselves. We do that already. But for a little while, just take that recourse to go within. And that changes things. So, Craig,
can I share with you some of the gems that I've found?
Oh, I was just going to ask you to do that. So, yes, great.
I've just opened my book. Here's Henry David Thoreau. Everybody's heard of Henry David Thoreau, the person who was the student, the protege of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who spent a little over 2 years at Walden Pond trying to get as close to nature as he could. Actually, what he was really trying to do at Walden Pond was trying to get as close to himself as he could. But here's just a few sentences of what he writes in a journal. He says, "In my better hours, I'm conscious of the influx of a serene and unquestionable wisdom. What is that other kind of life to which I'm thus continually allured, which I alone love? Are our serene moments simply a transient realization of what might be the whole tenor of our lives? To be calm, serene. There is the calmness of the lake when there's not a breath of wind. So it is with us. Sometimes we are clarified and calmed healthily, as we never were before in our lives, not by an opiate, but by some unconscious obedience to the all-just laws, so that we become like a still lake of purest crystal, and without an effort, our depths are revealed to ourselves. All the world goes by us and is reflected in our deeps. Such clarity."
Wow.
So here's Thoreau talking about the experience of what we call transcending. Transcending means to go beyond. To go beyond what? Just to go beyond the noise, the activity of thoughts and perceptions, to go inward to where consciousness is quiet. And so he describes it beautifully here. Like a lake, a still lake of purest crystal, and without an effort, our depths are revealed to ourselves.
Oh.
Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, really, that sounds good.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have read Thoreau, have read Walden, have read his journals, have read this passage. And, I think it sounds good to people, yeah, and how do I get it? They probably think that this is just something that happened to Thoreau by accident. It's nice. It's never happened to me, or it maybe happened to me when I was a kid, but I don't know how to get it back, and now I've got to go do something else. My business is calling, and so you forget that here's this beautiful description. And but Thoreau is basically saying anybody can have this. Yeah. Here's Einstein, Albert Einstein, regarded by many as the greatest scientist who ever lived. He says, "Still there are moments when one feels free from one's own identification with human limitations and inadequacies. At such moments, one imagines that one stands on some spot of a small planet, gazing in amazement at the cold yet profoundly moving beauty of the eternal, the unfathomable. Life and death flow into one, and there is neither evolution nor destiny, only being." So here again, he's describing the same experience Thoreau described in slightly different words, but again, describing the experience of inner stillness, moving beyond human limitations and inadequacies, and experiencing what he calls just being, beyond life, beyond death, beyond change, just the experience of being.
Yeah, and I think that's what comes out in the book, and all those examples. No matter what their background or culture was, you found that similarity in their words when they were describing that experience.
Right. Well, when you know what you're looking for, and particularly when you've had the experience, then you read these things and they really light up. Here's Helen Keller, blind and deaf, nearly from birth, one of the great women of the 20th century, and she says, "There is in the blind, as in the seeing, an absolute which gives truth to that which we know to be true, order to what is orderly, beauty to the beautiful, touchableness to what is tangible, reality, of which visible things are the symbol, shines before my mind. While I walk about my chamber with unsteady steps, my spirit sweeps skyward on eagle wings and looks out with unquenchable vision upon the world of eternal beauty." So a different way of framing the experience, but it's the same experience, describing, in her words, she describes an absolute, she makes that a capital A, which underlies everything that we experience. And it can be experienced. She's talking about how she experiences it. It makes her feel like her spirit is sweeping skyward. So she, just like the previous passages I read, she just feels that in this experience she's moved beyond limitations, beyond boundaries, into a state of freedom, into an experience of eternal beauty. She's blind, so she can't really see the outer world, but the inner world, which she's fathomed, is beautiful. It's absolute. Yeah. It's orderly.
Well, I think what else is interesting about that particular passage that struck me is just one little place where she says she has unsteady steps, but that's inconsequential. That's a reality. People have responsibilities. Yeah. Life happens. It's out there. Stress comes at you, but there is something that's deep within that gives that centeredness, that quiet within, so that handling those things becomes a secondary thing, not a first thing and only thing. But yeah, it's part of it. But if I have this quiet within, I can handle that better. That's not the biggest deal now. The bigger deal is that absolute part.
Yeah, beautiful. And that quiet within, that absolute part, it's there for everybody. That silent, pure consciousness is deep within us. It's always been there. It's there right now for everybody. It always will be there, whether people experience it or not. And it just waits to be awakened, waits to be experienced. And how do we experience it? Just by letting the mind settle inward to have that experience. And I think I think everybody feels some kind of yearning some kind of feeling that there must be more to life than they're living. And where do you find it? And the whole story of the last few centuries, especially the last few decades, is people think that more to life, that more to living is to be found outward through more things or more money or more prestige or more likes on my Facebook page or more in the outward world. But throughout time, throughout the world, the message of the wise is always that what's important is within. The treasure to be found, to be sought above all else, is within.
Yeah.
And that sounds good to people, but the question is, how do I get it?
Right. How do I get it?
At that?
Yeah, because a lot of times I've noticed there's effort involved, and people think, well, I'm going to try to get to that experience. And I say, well, there's a verb in your sentence. So that's probably not going to be as effective because we're so used to, in our culture and our societies, trying to achieve something. So we'll have an aim and we want to target it. And I'll say, no, the mind's not a video game. You're not going to earn points if you get to the blue line. No, you want to do something different from what we're used to. And that means you don't engage what you're familiar with, which is, I got to get here, I got to earn this, I got to do that. That's fine for the outer world. But once you transcend, that those rules, they don't apply now. And so that's the simplicity of the TM technique, particularly allowing the mind to move within. It already knows how to do it, but there is a precision there. You do have to have the right angle, and then it can move in easily. And people are looking for that quiet state, yes, but they don't know how to achieve that without using the same habits that we've always used.
Yeah, there are increasing number of people, and throughout time, great people have had the insight that the inner reality is revealed, the inner silence is revealed when the mind becomes free of thought. And so there have been techniques to try to still the mind, to try to push out thought, to sit and be alert to when thoughts come and just push them out or shoot them out and you know that you only have to think about it for a moment to realize that any kind of effort to try to push out thoughts is only going to stir the mind more.
Yeah.
You know, imagine that you're sitting by the side of a small pool and it's wavy and your job is to make the pool still. You're not going to make the pool still by pushing the waves down. You're only going to create more waves that way. So, as you were saying, the mind has the natural ability to become still. So the technique for enabling that experience has to take advantage of the mind's natural ability, natural tendency.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have some more examples? One time when we spoke, you talked about I think Wordsworth and his experience.
Yeah, I'd like to do Wordsworth again because it's so perfect. This is a textbook case. Wordsworth, William Wordsworth was the poet laureate of England in the early 1800s, and he published his first book in 1898. And in one of his poems, actually, he was out hiking around the countryside, and he stopped for a minute, and this experience of transcending happened spontaneously to him, even in the absence of a technique. And he describes it in one of his poems, and here's how it goes. As that blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened, that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, all with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. So here this is just so precise, and he's talking about his inner experience. He's talking about how his body changes. He begins by talking about that blessed mood. So blessed means blessed, a kind of sense of holiness or sanctity. He talks about how the whole weight of the world feels as though it's being lifted from his shoulders. And then he talks about how the affections gently lead us on. So this is the point about effortlessness. He's not contriving anything. He's not straining. He's not trying to force some kind of experience. He's just there, and he feels as though the affections gently lead us on. He might say gently lead us inward. And then he describes the changes taking place in his body because, you know, as you were saying at the beginning, when we have this meditative experience, this transcending experience, it's accompanied by and it's supported by very distinct, even dramatic changes in the way our body functions and in the way our brain functions. Wordsworth was alert enough to notice this. He says, the breath of this corporeal frame. The corporeal frame is the body, so the breath of this corporeal frame, and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended. So he's describing a slowing of the heart rate. He's describing a slowing of the breath rate, describing deep physiological rest. And in fact, he comes right out and says it. He says, we're laid asleep in body. Laid asleep in body. But is he sleeping? No, he's not sleeping, because right away he says we become a living soul. So laid asleep in body, but he becomes a living soul. And I love that phrase, a living soul.
Yeah.
It's as if prior to this experience he was dead, or at least he was not fully alive. But it's only during this quiet inward stillness that he feels that he's finally fully alive, that he can call himself a living soul. And then just these beautiful closing lines, the eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy. Where's the power of harmony coming from? Where's the deep power of joy coming from? From within him. And then the final closing line, he says, we see into the life of things. In other words, what he's saying is, I feel like I'm coming into contact with some deep inner essence. You know, the inner essence of life itself I'm experiencing within me. And all it takes is for my mind to become quiet. And then I see into the life of things.
Yeah.
Not this or that thing. Just talking about pure consciousness here, pure stillness. But this is the life of things. This is the essence of everything. We find that time and again from people who've had this experience, that they just feel that they're really in touch with. Like here's Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, 600 or 700 BC. He talks about how in the meditative experience, he says, one finds the anchor of the universe within himself. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the reality. It's so simple. There right now for everybody. It just requires allowing the mind to become still.
Yeah, I think we've spent so much time going in the other direction, and it's caused a lot of, you used the ocean and the pond. These are really great analogies, because when the storm is brewing and the waves are crashing, you can try to solve the problem there, but there's a lot going on. It would make sense if you go beyond that, there's more quiet, there's more evenness. And I think when we're approaching life, we're tending to get involved in the action so much so that we lose sight of that settled state, and that causes the problems, not just in individual life, but we see it in community life and national life as well.
Well, it's a beautiful insight. So many people feel stressed, overwhelmed with stress, panic attacks. Stress on the job is, it just makes work difficult for people. It causes absenteeism. It causes poor performance. Stress is either the cause of or the exacerbator of most disease. So we're just awash in stress. And what so many people think is the stress is coming at me from outside. It's because the world is so fast-paced. It's because I have so much to do. I've got so much on my plate. I have so many responsibilities. I have my family. I'm working 2 jobs. The stress is coming from outside of me. And on one level, that's true. But on another level, the ultimate source of stress is that we're just not anchored to the silence that's within us. That's the ultimate stress. And even if, even in a quieter situation, eventually you're going to feel that something's missing. That my where's my purpose in life? What am I? Who am I? And the lack of an answer to that question is a source of stress. So the ultimate way to relieve stress is, first of all, to connect yourself to your own self, your own innermost self, your own silent, unbounded self. And as you were saying, when you do that, then you gain this inner anchor. You gain day by day, week by week, month by month, a greater sense of inner calm and peace, and a greater ability to handle the stress that's coming at you from the outside. So it's not really the fault of the world that we are we experience stress. It's that we just need to fully develop ourselves, including our innermost self, which is silent and peaceful and creative and joyful and blissful and free, liberated.
Yeah. And I think an important point is that they exist at the same time. It's not one or the other.
Right.
You have both. You're a dynamic person, and at the same time, you have that evenness within. And one of my favorite examples in your book, I use it a lot, is Billie Jean King, very dynamic athlete who had those experiences while she was engaged in tournaments. So it isn't like it's something that you'll only have when you're sitting with your eyes closed. It's something that has been cultured in the nervous system to the point where it's there even in dynamic activity.
Yeah, and the way to do that is just to have that diving within experience, that transcending experience on a regular basis. And then gradually you bring more and more of that out into your activity. Gradually that becomes your habitual way of functioning, so that coming back to the analogy of the mind being like a pool or an ocean, normally we're just awake only at the surface of that ocean, the surface of that pool, only where the waves are, not knowing that there's a depth of stillness within us. But when we dive within and experience that depth of stillness and then come out and then dive within and experience the depth of stillness again, when we do that regularly, ideally twice a day, then gradually that depth of stillness, we experience that throughout the day. Or to put it another way, the mind is awake, fully awake, not just at the surface, but fully awake all the way to its depth, all the way to the stillness at its depth, all the time throughout the day. So that, as you were just saying so nicely there, we can be silent inside, calm inside, even in the most frenetic, dynamic activity.
Can you share with us some more examples? I find that very inspiring. Some of these people.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Billie Jean King. Let me read that. Billie Jean King, as you mentioned, one of the great athletes of all time, great women's tennis player, but she's really transcended her sport. She was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom about 8 years ago in the White House. That's the nation's highest civilian honor. Wonderful woman. So she's talking about her peak moments on the tennis court. She says, "On my very best days, I have this fantastic, utterly unself-conscious feeling of invincibility. I don't worry about how I'm hitting the ball, and I hardly notice my opponent at all. It's like I'm out there by myself. I concentrate only on the ball in relationship to the face of my racket, which is a full-time job anyway, since no two balls ever come over the net the same way. I appreciate what my opponent is doing, but in a very detached, abstract way, like an observer in the next room. I see her moving to her left or right, but it's almost as though there weren't any real opponent, as though I didn't know and certainly didn't care whom I was playing against. When I'm in that kind of state, I feel that tennis is an art form that's capable of moving both the players and the audience. When I'm performing at my absolute best, I think that some of the euphoria that I feel must be transmitted to the audience." So there's a beautiful passage describing, it's a classic description of what athletes call the zone. And athletes who've had that experience, many will tell you that's why they do sports, is to try to get that experience again. The zone experience is characterized by a feeling of peak performance on the one hand, and yet, on the other hand, a feeling of effortlessness to the extent of being silent, of not even being participating, of just watching what you're doing. And then the third component is, Billie Jean King uses the word euphoria, so bliss. So you've got peak performance, effortlessness, and bliss all together. I want to read a little bit more from Billie Jean King where she goes into this in more detail. And this is a great passage because it really highlights the idea of the mind being fully awake, not just at the surface, but at the silent depth. So here's Billie Jean. "The perfect shot is another matter. They don't come along very often, but when they do, they're great. It gives me a marvelous feeling of almost perfect joy, especially if I can pull one off on the very last shot of the match. I can almost feel it coming. It usually happens on one of those days when everything is just right, when the crowd is large and enthusiastic, and my concentration is so perfect, it almost seems as though I'm able to transport myself beyond the turmoil on the court to some place of total peace and calm. I know where the ball is on every shot, and it always looks as big and well-defined as a basketball. Just a huge thing that I couldn't miss if I wanted to. I've got perfect control of the match. My rhythm and movements are excellent, and everything's just in total balance. That perfect moment happens in all sports. It's a perfect combination of a violent action taking place in an atmosphere of total tranquility. My heart pounds, my eyes get damp, and my ears feel like they're wiggling, but it's also just totally peaceful. And when it happens, I want to stop the match and grab the microphone and shout, "That's what it's all about," because it is. It's not the big prize I'm going to win at the end of the match or anything else. It's just having done something that's totally pure and having experienced the perfect emotion. And I'm always sad that I can't communicate that feeling right at the moment it's happening. I can only hope that people realize what's going on. If anybody out there was counting, she used the word perfect 7 times in that short passage. And there are people who are saying that you can't, there's no such thing as perfection, you can't live perfection. I think Billie Jean King, at least for these moments on the tennis courts, would beg to differ. She's experiencing what she feels is perfect, and she's telling us what it looks and feels like, at least for a tennis player.
I like the part, I think it is my favorite one at the very end when she said she wants to run over to the microphone and tell everybody.
Yeah.
Because it's just glorious. And what matters to her at that very moment isn't whether she's winning or not or gets a trophy. It's what she's experiencing inside herself while she's engaged in this very dynamic sport. So it's very inspiring.
Yeah, and she does such a great job of characterizing that experience of silence while she's engaged. For example, just to repeat this line, she says, "It's almost as though I'm able to transport myself beyond the turmoil on the court to some place of total peace and calm."
Yeah, that's nice.
Where is the place of total peace and calm? Where is it? It's inside her.
Yeah.
It's the only place it can be.
Yeah.
Or she says, it's a perfect combination of a violent action taking place in an atmosphere of total tranquility. Where's the atmosphere of total tranquility? It's at the depth of her own mind. Somehow just during those moments on the court, the full depth of her mind was awake. Not just the surface where it's wavy, but the full depth. From the wavy surface on inward to the silent center, the silent source. So that mind is fully awake, and that's why she can say this. Perfect combination of a violent action taking place in an atmosphere of total tranquility. Yeah. Or the third one here is where she says, "My heart pounds, my eyes get damp, and my ears feel like they're wiggling." That's the surface. But it's also just totally peaceful. That's the depth.
Yeah, that's
and they're coexisting.
Yeah.
They're part of the same mind, active on the surface and dynamic, winning championships. Hitting perfect shots, but anchored in the depth. And why is she hitting the perfect shot? Precisely because she's anchored in the depth. The two go hand in hand. That's not an accident. The peak performance happens just because the mind is fully awake.
Yeah, that's
the point. So for people who might ask, okay, meditation, it sounds good, quiet mind sounds good, but I live in a dynamic world and I've got to perform every day. Well, if you want to perform, and if you want to perform at your peak, if you've got deliverables to deliver, then make sure that you're anchored in your inner silence, which after all is an unbounded wellspring of creativity and intelligence, and who can't use more of that?
Yeah, that's the full range, and we've been, as you said, kind of more on that active range, but having an anchor in the depth allows for the surface to work for us without working against us.
That's right. It's because when the mind settles down and the body settles down like that, that's when the mind and the body come into perfect coordination, perfect synchrony. That's when the mind and body are fully integrated. And it's through our bodies that we act in the world. And if we want our action to be effective, even if you're not a tennis player, even if no matter what you're doing in your life, you are performing some kind of action, you want that action to be effective and successful. That's where fulfillment comes from. That's where having integrated mind and body is really important. One thing you mentioned at the very beginning of the show was how the brain's style of functioning changes every time we switch from one state of consciousness to another. If you're a brain scientist and looking at the EEG waves, the electrical waves coming off the cortex of the brain, you can tell without seeing the person physically whether that person is sleeping or dreaming or awake. And similarly, you can tell if that person is transcending, whether that person is diving within. And the way you can tell that, the way a brain technician can tell that, is that the brain functioning becomes highly integrated when we transcend. In fact, research on people who practice the TM technique finds that within 60 seconds of beginning their practice, of closing their eyes to begin their practice, their brain shifts from a more or less random and shifting style of functioning to a highly stable, synchronous, integrated style. You don't even have to analyze the waves mathematically. You can see it right on the computer screen. Really elegant picture. And the people who are meditating, they're not trying to make that happen. They don't have the intention to make that happen, as in biofeedback. They're just doing this effortless technique, allowing the mind to dive inward. And as a spontaneous byproduct, the brain dramatically changes the way it functions into this integrated style. Yeah. And everybody's brain has the ability to do that.
Yeah, it's really important to understand this is a physiological thing. Craig, we have about 2 minutes left before we're going to end our show, and I just want to know if you have any more inspiring words for us. We absolutely enjoyed hearing you speak today on your book. Any other points to bring out, or any final quotes to share?
Yeah, one last thought, and it's a big one, and it probably is worth a conversation by itself. We all want to have a fulfilling life personally. We all want to be healthy. We all want to contribute maximum to the world around us. So we all want that, and that's reason enough to learn how to dive within. But I think when we all look out at the world, we're increasingly concerned. We're concerned by climate change. We're concerned by the rising, acidity of the oceans. We're concerned by the rising toxicity of our water and our soil and our air, and we're concerned by human problems. Concerned about human problems like economic disparity and human trafficking and the opioid addiction. And, when you start to look at the problems that afflict us, it just gets depressing pretty quickly. I just want to close with a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, and this is in 1848 when he wrote this, he wrote, "The reason why the world lacks unity and lies broken and in heaps is because man is disunited with himself." So the whole point, let me just read that again. The reason why the world lacks unity and lies broken and in heaps is because man is disunited with himself.
Well,
it's a big idea, but really the fundamental solution to the problems that we face, which seem so daunting in the world, once again, is to reunite us to ourselves, which is within us, and it's so easy to do.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us today, and I hope we will talk again, and have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me on your show, Kathy.
Oh, you're so welcome. Enjoy the day.